Good evening. I am Alfred Loomis, and I was a builder by trade. And I came here, well, I was born in 1810 and came here in about a winter of 1845. And I had quite a reputation for building, I guess, around this area and I had plenty of work to do in the Beaver Dam area. And when the first mill in Beaver Dam burnt down, Dr. Voigt contacted me to build a new one. And so that's what I did, and there's a lot of and so with the possibility of water power brought a lot of speculating new Yankees from out east to build us, and mills were what actually built these towns. So the mills, so anyway, like in every town, is there where you go through a town and where isn't there one with a mill street in it? There's almost one in every town in that. So the logging mills provided the lumber for homes and farms, and the grain and woolen mills prepared the farmers' products for sale and shipment, and then skilled tradesmen like myself, well, we made it all happen. And there was a mill, what do they call him? A mill furnishing salesman. He came around and then he asked to see the blueprints for the new mill. And so they all sent them to me. And he came and asked me, he's like, so where's the blueprints for the new mill? And I told him, right up here. Got it all right here. So believe it or not, I built that mill without any blueprints or plans, and it went together just right. And it ran a nice, good, sturdy mill, and it ran until 1881 when it too burnt down. So mills they were very prone to fires, and that. So with the sawdust, the flour, the lint, the cotton lint, the wool, and then with the combination of gears and belts, created quite a flammable mix, So, well, enough about me. My wife Nancy here, she's with us tonight here, and some of my kids. And just to give you a little side, my son, the oldest son, George, he was, tell you a little story about George. He was out with his girlfriend and wooing this young gal here, Laura Howe, and they were near the depot downtown, and with their horse and wagon, and they got scared by the incoming train and launched them off the wagon, and that knocked them both unconscious. Well, Laura, she ended up dislocating her ankle, and George ended up getting cuts and scrapes and bruises all over his body and that. And believe it or not, he got stepped on by the horse, they said. But everything turned out okay, so we're very lucky. But when I think about all these horseless carriages and stuff like that go driving by here and that I see and that, I don't know how parents can be not worried about their teenagers driving these crazy old contraptions down the road and that. But I guess that's what parents do, just worry about their kids a little bit. So that's a little background on me, Alfred Loomis.
Good evening. Welcome. It's a gorgeous evening and glad to have you here. My name is Thomas Young, and I came along with my wife Lucille in the early 1840s from England. Lucille is buried here, and she has a head marker, but it's sort of sunken into the ground that I can't quite find it today. I think I might have been buried next to her, but I'm not sure. I hope they didn't put me in one of my ale caves. Lucille died in 1865 at the ripe old age of 67. Now, when I said ale caves, I was the very first brewer here in Beaver Dam. I had what you call a farm brewery. And actually, if you're interested in those, you can go down to Eagle, to Old World, Wisconsin, and they have one for you to look at, an operational one. But I I digest, or I divert. As I said, I was the first brewer here in Beaver Dam, and I had 3 large ale caves for brewing and aging my beer. It was quite a good business. We went and we had a lot of people who bought our beer. It was an English old brown ale, and we had in Beaver, just in Beaver Dam, we had several hotels, and then there was also Browers, which was a rest stop for the coaches. And there were other places for rest stops. Rolling Prairie, Atwater, or at my age I forget things. There were quite a few of them in the Dodge County area. I had a good business because of all these different places to sell. Buckhorn, that's the other one. Okay, so I had a good business, all these places to sell, but competition, I got driven out because the German brewers came to town. And I liked my stout English ale, but they started brewing the Pilsners, and the people seemed to like those better. And they went and had more modernized and were able to produce it faster. So they went and they drove me, by 1853 they drove me out of business. And so I just stuck to farming after that. Now it's actually interesting, the brewers were all close to one another on Madison Street, and the brewers ended up being buried close to one another. It's called Brewers Row out at Oakwood Cemetery. I talked about my 3 ale caves. One of them still hasn't collapsed. It's out on Prospect Street, out past what used to be the mill pond, which is now the beach. But that ale cave, it was the biggest one was in very good shape. They even, as recently as a few years ago, in the 1950s, Wayland Academy, they had a men's men's club called the Addison Club, and they'd have their secret initiations out there. It was a scary place in that dark, moist cave. And it was a huge cave actually, because it was narrow, that you could put your barrels on each side, but you could go down with a team of horses and a wagon, and you could actually turn that team of horses around at the end and come back out. It's still there today. I don't want anyone thinking of going out there to take a look at it, because unfortunately in the last 10 years it's private property to start with, and after the last 10 years as the wood has started to give way and you really can't find the entrance, and it's a dangerous place to go. So stay safe, just be happy I told you about it. Have a good evening.
Well, good evening, and what a lovely evening it is, and so good of you to visit here. My name is Mary Rose. I'm the wife of the Honorable Judge Samuel Rose. He came here in 1855 from Fort Dodge, Iowa. He was quite a man. He was a lawyer, he was a judge, and he was a politician. And we were rather social. We had to be, because he was all of that and more. Our beautiful home, with its beautiful gardens, was at the top of the Front Street Hill, overlooking downtown Beaver Dam. And it's still a commanding view. Now the judge, well, actually, the judge and I had the strangest and unluckiest fate ever to befall a man. You see, my nephew, James Hall, asked to come and stay with us for a while because he was hoping that the clean, clear air would help him with his lung condition called lung hemorrhage. You know it today as tuberculosis. And there's a cure, but there was no cure then. So the judge had to make a trip to Milwaukee, and he had stopped at an inn in Watertown. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, a messenger told him that the nephew, James Hall, had passed away of his illness. But here's what's really strange. It seems that the judge had the very same thing happen in the same place, at the same time, the same month and day. He received a message that his own nephew, Botsford, had passed away in their home of the same illness. What a strange and bewildering set of circumstances. It affected us both very badly. You know, the judge was quite revered in town. Also in Iowa, there's actually a township named after him, Rose Grove. He was very well liked in Beaver Dam and among the first pioneers. Thank you.
Are y'all from Beaver Dam or nearby? It's a lovely town, and I'm so glad my husband and I made the journey. I think my descendants would agree with that, because over five generations, and they're still here. Now, the one thing is about the gravestone. The stone that was here said wife, but now a descendant was kind enough to put a new gravestone in for me with my name, Elizabeth Thompson. My husband and I, Russell, came here along with our youngest daughter, Eliza, in 1844. It was a difficult trip, especially with oxen-pulled wagon. I did celebrate my 60th birthday on the journey, and to celebrate, I used my best china to have tea. That china's been passed around down for generations and is known as oxenware. My daughter Eliza is buried here next to me. Her first husband was Joseph Downing. He froze to death walking home from Kingston to Buffalo Lake along the Fox River up in Marquette County. His little dog stayed with him the whole night. Eventually they brought him back here and buried him next to Eliza. He was only 34 years old. Eliza's second husband was James Hall. He was a farmer in Calamus Township. He was a widower with 2 children from his first wife, Emma, who passed away in 1853. In 1858, Eliza and James wed and were blessed with 2 daughters, Elzora and Lottie. Lottie is buried here with me. Our family continues to grow, but stays near even in death.
Good evening. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Mrs. Esther Douglas, widow of John Douglas, the very first man in Beaver Dam to enlist in the War of the States. I was so very proud of him until he allowed our son Henry, then only 15, to enlist too. No railing, scolding, or tears would sway either of them, and off to war they proudly went, leaving me alone to fret and worry. How I hate that I was proven right. Henry, my sweet Henry, died at Williamsburg at only 16 on September of 1862. I was told his gun got wet and wouldn't fire, so during the heat of battle, while his regiment was falling back, he deliberately sat down, took his screwdriver out, dismantled and dried the gun, put it back together, and got right back up and started fighting again. His monument reads, "The young hero of Williamsburg, May 5, 1862. Henry A., son of John A. Douglas, died in the service of his country September 28, 1862, aged 16 years, erected by his comrades in arms of Company D, 5th Regiment, Wisconsin Volunteers. The patriot boy from his soldier grave speaks proud, great thoughts to the true and brave, and waves a light from the spirit's shore of glad, pure joy forevermore. While desperately mourning the loss of our son, only 1 month later, October of 1862, my husband John, quartermaster of the 20th Wisconsin, died in Lebanon, Missouri. He was only 42 years old. You say you can't imagine? Believe me, you can't. All I had left to force me out of bed was our dear little John Jr. He kept me sane for 7 years, then died in 1869 at only 15. Ladies, do not let your sons go off to war.
Well, good evening. I'm going to tell you the story about the Dexter family. My name is Reuben Dexter, and we moved to Beaver Dam from New Hampshire. My wife and I and our 3 children had 2 sons, Daniel, who's buried here, and also had a son whose name was John, and a daughter named Louise. John moved on after living on our farm for a number of years, and he is buried in the Oakwood Cemetery. But the story I think is interesting is Louise, our daughter. After a number of years, and she just always had this fascination with the West and wanted to move out west, so she actually moved to Tucson, Arizona. And in 1873, she got married to James Toole, and they had 5 children. Now here's where the interesting story begins. Mr. Toole was a very interesting person. He was born in upstate New York and made his way down to New Orleans, where he became involved with the mercantile business. In 1849, the gold rush started, and gold fever. He made his way out to California and got involved with the gold rush, made some money. But then when the Civil War started in 1861, he went into the Union Army, and he served in Tucson and also in New Mexico and Texas. After the war, he moved back to Tucson in 1873, married my daughter Louise. And their 5 children, they lived there for a period of time. And he became mayor also in 1873, and people liked him a lot. In fact, they re-elected him 4 times. And so he's a very popular person, also involved in the territorial government, because at that time, Arizona was a territory and not a state. So he was involved in the territorial government. He was also instrumental in getting the railroad to come to Tucson, and also got involved in banking. So as I said, a very popular person. People liked him a lot. In fact, they liked him so much they named a street after him in Tucson, and it's still there today. And that's Toole Street. What happened though in 1877, the territorial capital that actually had used Tucson as the capital city, they moved north. And the bank that he was involved with went out of business, and they were bankrupt. And the only thing they had left was their house. So James Toole sent the family back to Beaver Dam. His wife, our daughter, and the 5 children came back to live with us, and he was going to join them a short time later. So one day he jumped on the train and started heading north and got to Trinidad, Colorado, and took his own life. So the interesting thing about it is that he and his wife are buried in Oakwood Cemetery. So here we have Beaver Dam, Wisconsin, a major connection with Tucson, Arizona. Thank you very much.